Hello and welcome to part two of Hearing Loss, Peter edition. In part one, we discussed Pete's early life, growing up in St. Albans, and we ended up when he left home around the age of 18. So in this part, we're covering the next couple decades after that. Dad, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mentioned that my leaving home was painful and difficult and accompanied by police at the time. And I went through 18 months of various stages of homelessness, from sleeping rough in like bus shelters, so that was my first night, to couch surfing, which a lot of people experiencing homelessness do, and stayed in Box Hill with some friends. For a while, family, friends, and eventually I was going with a girl, Marion, and she unfortunately also became homeless. She had a rough home life, and eventually we kind of moved in together around different really cheap and nasty boarding houses, and there were plenty around back then, and there are still plenty around today. We ended up in St Kilda, just living a day-to-day, existence. It was a real struggle. I had got engaged to Marion. I remember having an engagement party at the St Albans Hotel. But now we were living together in a day when you weren't able to do that without saying you were married. So we wore rings. But life was ugly. I remember getting drunk a lot. We fought all the time. Drink became a real problem for me because I was trying to escape the pain of it all. And in the midst of all this, I was doing teachers college. It was my first year of teachers college. So trying to hold all that together, being a teachers college, living in unsafe, uncertain environment. Place in particular where we lived in St Kilda was one room with a dirty mattress on the middle of the floor that we slept on. It was share bathroom, share kitchen, share everything else. And it was, the police were in there all the time. It was just a very unsettling, very, I really hated that living like that. Mary and I were not getting on, and one day in a fight, she threw the engagement ring I'd given her at me, and I picked it up and pocketed it, which I shouldn't have done. Should have given it back to her at some point. And I decided it was time for me to go. I had a friend staying with us, and he had a car. And while Marion was at work, I loaded my stuff, which wasn't a lot, mainly clothes, and headed back to St Albans. After said about 18 months sleeping and doing it rough and in various stages of homelessness.
Yeah.
I moved in with my sister Betty, who'd got married. I was the oldest. Betty's the next one down.
Yep.
And she got married to Mike, and I moved in with them for a while. I remember teaching their first child, Lisa, to walk. And eventually Mum and Dad moved into the middle of town where Mum began to run a pet shop, and they moved above the pet shop. There was housing or accommodation above the pet shop. And my other sister Jane had a place up above one of the other shops, and I moved in with Jane, and eventually moved in with my parents back. I had an uneasy truce with my dad. We just stayed out of his way, and continued on with teachers college. I'd left Marion now. We were no longer together. A few things started to happen for me around that time that were real critical, in a sense, life-changing. I had a good friend, Tom, who'd come from Holland, migrated from Holland, and we were good friends, and we hung out together, and we started to go to dances together. And one of our favorite spots was Powerhouse in the city, on Albert Park Lake. And one certain night, now strange background story to this is I was going with a girl called Irene, and it was her 18th birthday. I was around 20 at the time, 19 maybe, 20, 20. And I was supposed to be going to a birthday party, but I'd lost interest in Irene. I was a real cad, Mike. And I decided instead to go to Powerhouse instead of going to her 18th birthday. And I went with Tom. But it was one of those life-changing, that stage in your life, decisions you make really make a difference. And as you get older, I don't know that they're all that life-changing, but back then, this was a life-changing decision. I went to Powerhouse. I was walking along. We called it the cattle run. The girls lined up. The guys walked along. Picked the girl you liked and asked if she wanted to dance. And I saw this young lady and her sister, obviously a couple of years older. And I asked the younger one if she would dance. I remember she had a polka dot dress on, stunning, beautiful girl. And to my surprise, she said yes. We were both underage in that where we went, Powerhouse, you had to be over 21. I was 20, and the girls had to be over 18. She was 16. And we hit it off and got on well. I remember passing on the balcony there at Powerhouse, and then kind of didn't think about it, went home, and a couple of weeks later I thought, she wasn't a bad girl. Couldn't remember her name. Pardon?
Was it a couple of weeks?
It was a couple of weeks later, or maybe a week later. It was a little while later. Couldn't remember her name, but I remembered her phone number. I'm good with numbers. So, and I can still today tell you her phone number, and there were less digits on phones. It was 494979. So I rang 494979, and a man answered. It was her father. And I said, could I talk to your daughter? And he said, which one? I've got 4 of them. And I said, well, run them past me, So he said, Chris. I said, no, I don't think it was Chris. Lynn. I said, no, not Lynn. Nola. I said, could be. What's the last one? He said, Ruth. I said, I think it's Nola. So he kind of sounded a bit, what have we got here? And went and got Nola, and sure enough, it was the girl that I'd spoken to. And we started dating, and it's 46 years of marriage later. But that night, things that worked out. And we were very different. She was from East Ivanhoe, wealthy family in a sense. When I rocked up for the first time at her place, I saw a guy in overalls at the front that I figured was the gardener. And I kind of, g'day, mate, where Mr. Wilkerson is. And he said, you're talking to him. He was, I've always liked Nola's dad, always got on well with him. He was almost like a father to me, he taught me about mechanics and fixing cars, and, he was a good guy. And that was a kind of beginning. But, I said there were a couple of things that really changed in my life at that time. The other one was something that happened a little bit earlier. That summer, I was with Irene, as I said, and we went to Queenscliff camping, the family, and I rocked it up at a thing called Theo's Coffee Shops, which was, I didn't know much about it. I just knew it was kind of a religious thing run by different denominations, a coffee shop. I went in there, began talking to a guy called Colin, who ran the coffee shop, had lots of talks to him about, God and where I was at. I was pretty lost. In fact, while I was with Marion, I'm going to kind of backtrack slightly.
Sorry.
And this is not that much earlier. I'm with Marion. I'm drunk a lot. I'm very unhappy. We're fighting all the time. I'm walking down the street one night, middle of the night, half drunk, crying out, saying, God, if you're out there, there's somebody out there, please help me. That's all I said. And now it's, it's kind of a year or so later, and I'm back in St. Albans. And I've walked into this coffee shop, and I'm talking to Colin, and there's something about this guy that was different. I ran rings around him in discussion. I was doing 3rd year philosophy then at college. And, I knew my arguments and how to argue, but he had something I didn't have, and that was peace. Peace with himself, peace within. So at the end of, I came back a few nights into that conversations, he gave me a New Testament to read, a Bible, which I held with real excitement. And I thought, wow, I want to get into this. And over the coming months, I really got into it. I didn't have any moment where I kind of made some transition to, Christianity. I always never felt Christianity was about rituals or religion, and smoke and mirrors. I was, to me, it was always about a relationship, getting to know God and understanding that he can get to know him. And that was kind of all the way through. That's all the way I've seen it. I've been trying to stay. I grew up in the Catholic Church and never had much time for all the rituals and all that kind of stuff. Still don't. So I kind of shared that with this new girl, Nola, and I don't know if I put some pressure on her, but come her birthday in September, when she's turning 17, I had bought her a Bible, which you do normally buy for a girl, don't you? A Bible. And we went to a Church for Christ rally, like a gathering with a God Squad, an amazing guy called John Smith, who's traveled all over the world. And he spoke a really dynamic message, and he gave the opportunity for people to come forward and, get to know God. And Noel went forward. So that was the beginning of her journey. And my journey had started probably 6 months or 9 months earlier.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, we dated for a few years, and around when Nola was, I think, 19, I talked to her father about us getting married, and did the old-fashioned ask for your daughter's hand in marriage.
Yeah.
And he said, fine, when she turns 21. I said, no. We're thinking, in 12 months' time, or I can't remember how long it was, mightn't have been that long. So we got married in August the 7th, 1976. That's pretty good. I remember that.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I've got some great photos. Maybe we'll get to put them up. Like, she was the most stunning bride, and beautiful. And I've been very fortunate. And two things really got me out of that hole that I was in.
Yeah.
In that my time in St Kilda and places like that. One was, starting to connect with God, and the other one was having an amazing wife. She came from a different background. Like I said, I was St Albans boy, working class. She was, East Ivanhoe, upper middle class, but she was not a snobby person. She was down to earth.
Yeah.
We had a lot of differences, and we fought a lot, and we still do from time to time, because we're from different backgrounds. But over time, our love has really grown. In my teaching career, then, I finished Teachers College, barely scraped through because my life had been very chaotic for quite a while. My first school was in Jacana in 1974, which is out the western suburbs. And I took an interest in kids with who are on the edges, struggling with reading. Particularly had a connection with one kid called Donald, who came from a very poor family, had very poor reading skills, and just struggled. I love the kid. I just connected with him and brought a budgie into my room, which he really liked. Just want to cut a long story short. I still have connection today with Donald. He's in his 50s now, and married, and has a house in Mildura and a job and all that. But if you would have seen him when I saw him as an 8-year-old, you would have thought, "Where's this kid going to go?" He's got learning difficulties. He struggles, and he's really made something of his life. And I've had various stages of his life, had connection with him, and went and saw him not too long ago up in Mildura. Cool. Which was cool. Very gratifying as a teacher to see the changes you make. From there, I went to Traralgon to an opportunity remedial grade. I started to take an interest in remedial, working with remedial kids. And from there, I went to St Albans Special. I grew up in St Albans. Special school there had just started, and I was in there in its first year as a teacher there. Hadn't done my training yet. I'd done primary school training, hadn't done special ed. So the following year, I went and did special education, and this is around the time I got married to Nola too. So I was working in opportunity remedial grade in Traralgon, and then St Albans Special. Then went and did postgraduate studies in special education. I really enjoyed that work. I enjoyed working with kids. Most of the kids I worked with had intellectual disability. I specialised in reading and in remedial reading, teaching kids reading, and said I really enjoyed that. We were living in Essendon when we first got married, but eventually bought a block of land in Frankston. Just a quick story on why we built in Frankston. It was kind of one of those amazing God things. We weren't sure where to go, and we took a weekend away to reflect and pray and think about it. We ended up in Lorne for a weekend. And I had this one night where we just kind of needed to kind of really work it through. We went into separate rooms, and I said, look, we're just going to think and pray about it and then come back together. And I didn't get much. I just sensed the word Frankston, and I wrote it down.
Mm.
And then we got back together, and I said to Nola, "How'd you go?" And she said, "Oh, I couldn't think of anything. The only thing that came to me was one word," and she written it on a piece of paper, and she opened it up, and it was Frankston. So that was pretty full on.
Yeah.
It was
Of
one of
all
those
places.
weird, out of there things, as I've never forgotten.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, that's where we're going. So
Yeah.
and it was, kind of, my parents were west, my family, hers were east, Frankston south,
Yeah. Yeah.
So we bought a block and built our first home. Loved it. It was an interesting kind of colonial style house. And those 6 years of Frankston were really good years of starting family. On October the 20th, 1980, our first child came along, Nathan. I had the real honor of being with all the births of my children, and
Mm.
I don't know if it gets much better than being at the birth of your own child, your own son, your own daughter. It just blows you away, and it's a time when you cry. And I felt the pain. I know men don't feel the pain. You feel the pain as your wife's going through it. Both our first two children were born at Frankston
Yeah.
Hospital, and it was a training hospital. So, and both times Nola was induced. So we
Mhm.
knew. I was running around Friday saying, "I'm going to have a baby. My wife's having a baby on Monday." And they think, "How do you know it's going to be Monday?" Because the baby was being induced. So I remember that time. It was really intense. You were
Yeah.
gowned up, doctors and students everywhere. It felt very much all in control because they had it all under control.
Yeah.
I remember holding my Nathan in my arms, my own son for the first time. Nathan means gift of God, and that's what we kind of felt that he was.
Mm.
And life changes. Children change your lives.
Yeah.
I think so much for the better. But again, I think that's our journey. Not everyone's journey is having kids, but for us, it was important. And yeah, it was really good. Not long after that, a year and a half later. Now I'm teaching now in Frankston at a school called Naranga Special School.
Mhm.
Next session, I'm going to share a little more about that, Mike. But they were good years at Frankston and
Yeah.
formative years. And I started up some initiatives there at the school. I said I'll talk about that another time. But
Mhm.
our daughter came along, Vanessa, and again, a vivid memories. I remember all the births of our kids and interesting things that happened. And I remember when Vanessa was born, again, a training hospital. It was all very much under control,
Mm.
and beautiful baby girl. And we were so blessed. We have a photo in the hallway, Mike, of that time in our lives where we're still a Frankston.
Yeah.
Nathan's about 18 months. Vanessa's, fairly newborn. And yeah, they were formative years for us, important years.
Yeah.
Around that time, we're now going into 1984. I've been running what I had set up, and I'll talk about it a little more another time, a Naranga Work Education Centre. I started up a special centre for kids at a TAFE college, training them for work. But around that time also, we were both really growing in our faith, and I had a strong sense that I was to leave teaching and go and do more theological training or
Mm.
study. I'm not sure where that was going to lead me, but Nola wasn't quite sure. But by 84, end of 83, Nola said, "You know what, you're right." It was a big call because we had a house, a home,
Yeah.
a good job. Nola had been working at World Vision
Mhm.
for a while, and she was good at that job. She enjoyed it,
Yeah.
although it meant a lot of travel. It was in the city. So it was a big call to leave everything behind. We even had a horse at that stage, Mike,
Yeah.
that we enlisted down
I've seen some
at
photos.
Warren. The horse had to go too. The horse went to my
Yeah.
niece, Lisa. Um, so we made the step of leaving all that behind. We rented a house to my brother, and we went to Lilydale.
Mm.
And there was a Bible college there. It was a non-denominational college, which I kind of preferred. And we beginning of 84. Life was very different then. We didn't have the income that we had. I think I was trying to survive on some long service leave, or unpaid leave, holiday leave. For the first year, we rented a house, and it was tight. During that first year in '84, a third baby. In fact, Nola was pregnant. We found out Nola was pregnant before we went to college, and still went to college. I remember some people thinking we were crazy.
Yeah, pretty
Why would you
gutsy.
leave your home and your job? And with two kids and a third one on the way, we felt it was right, and we went. And Michael was born at Mitcham Hospital, but now gone was
Stephen.
all. It wasn't a training hospital. It was. Did I say Michael? I meant Steve. Sorry, there's too many of you. Stephen was born in Mitcham Hospital, and it was a smaller hospital, and the doctor barely made it on time, and it was chaotic. It wasn't all organized like Frankston, the training hospital. This was a small hospital, and yeah, it was chaos. I remember getting so uptight with it, or inside feeling the pain of Noel, that I had to go off and vomit, throw up at the toilets. But then out came Steve, and he was beautiful. I remember him having these solid legs. I thought he's going to be a footballer. And Steve was born, and we were still in the house that we rented. Following year, we went on campus, which again was tough. Those college years were hard years in terms of financial. We were struggling. I was working night shift at a biscuit factory at Arnott's, cleaning, and daytime I was studying full time. I also took on youth work at the church, and raising a family, young kids. 1986, we're at college now. We're on campus, and our fourth child came along. I know I've told you this, Mike, but I don't think we were going to have more. We're going to have three. But one night, really in a time with God, I really felt him saying, "I want you to have a fourth child." So who are we to argue with him?
It's worked out. It worked out pretty well.
It worked out, yeah. So we had a fourth child, and this time it was at Lilydale Bush Nursing Hospital, and I clearly remember, Mike, the birth. Again, it's such an honor being there as a father, and out comes this beautiful boy, Michael. We were so delighted to have you, and taking you back was hard because we're in a small place, but it was great. And we changed cars then, Mike, because we couldn't fit you in the station wagon we had. We ended up getting a van, but again, I think we felt complete with our fourth child. And your name, Michael, means Michael is a Hebrew word meaning one who is like God. All our names of our kids, we wanted to pick names that meant something. Steve meant crown, kingly crown. Vanessa meant butterfly. Don't ask me how we came up with that, but all the names seemed to be the right names as time went on. Kind of a name seems to stick.
Can we quickly talk about Vanessa's choice of middle name? Because she's not a Loss anymore. She's a Walker now, but Vanessa Joyless. I heard you guys came up with a list of names not to use with the surname Loss.
Yes, yeah. When she got that name from Mum, Nola's middle name was Joy.
Yeah.
And so that's how Vanessa got the middle name Joy. Yours is Gary. Mike, I think I named your middle name Gary after a good friend of mine at high school that I hung out with, whose name was Gary. And I have good memories of my time with Gary. So I thought, what's a good name that I like,
Yeah.
So that's how you got Gary. So we're now in the mid 80s, late 80s, mid 80s. Mike was born in 1986 in Lilydale. We're now in our own home in Lilydale. We built a house in Achilles Court. That was interesting because we're always on a budget. So we did all our own cleaning of the site. We did our own painting. Had a working bee with painting. That was messy, but it was fun. We did our own tiling, all of that kind of stuff to kind of cut costs.
Yeah.
But we had a nice 4-bedroom house in Lilydale in a new estate, and it was good. I've got lots of memories of the kids in particular. I've always loved kids, particularly young kids. I relate to, and often we would go out to parks together. Ringwood Lakes. I don't know if you remember this, Mike. Maybe not.
No.
But you guys to the Ringwood Lakes, where there was a lake and swings and slides, and Lilydale itself, the swimming pool there. Yeah, it was. They were good years, and I said, I think times when kids are little, they're hard times, but they're also very enjoyable times with kids. And I've always liked young kids, playing with them and enjoying them. It was hard because of the pressure of college. I did finish at the end of the 80s. I finished with a degree in theology with honors, and I did okay. But I was kind of juggling so many things. I'd done youth pastor. Somewhere in that time, I had a kind of a bit of a mental breakdown. I was doing Hebrew at the time, which is difficult stuff, and I remember dropping out of a subject because I didn't turn up because I just wasn't mentally well. But look, I got through, finished the course. The Hebrew wasn't necessary. I just did it because I wanted to, I liked Hebrew and I wanted to learn it.
Yeah.
And by the end of the 80s, we'd spent a few years. I haven't mentioned this, but I'd been invited to come on the pastoral team at Lilydale as an associate pastor. That's why I was doing youth. Also did a little bit in kind of healing counseling area as well at Lilydale. And eventually, we was now approaching 1990, and I felt it was time to move on. We'd been in our house for a few years at Lilydale. Nathan and Vanessa were starting to go to primary school. Steve hadn't started yet. Mike was too young, of course, would have been at playgroup or kinder. I felt it was time to move on, and Nola did too. We didn't know where. We just said to the church that we're finishing. I think it was a 3-year term. Not sure where that was going to lead us. Again, a difficult, saying we're moving on, but not knowing where you're moving is a hard call. But that's what we decided. And in a few months, a month or so after that, I got an invitation to go to Williamstown. And that's where the kind of next chapter begins at Williamstown Baptist. By then, the kids said in school, and Steve's about to start school around that time. Kind of looking back over those years, I kind of went from this guy, difficult kind of family life in St Albans. I'd say difficult, but my brothers and sisters, we get on well. Well, at that time, we fought, of course, but it was a good family, and I appreciate. I've 5 brothers and sisters. I'm, the oldest of 6, and I've appreciated them, and they're good people. I have good relationships now with all of them. And I can ring them and talk to them. We get together once a year for a family gathering. So, I could paint a picture of a family life that was difficult, but somehow it all got held together. Mum in particular, my mum really held family together. And my dad, as I said, I made peace with my dad in my 30s in particular, rang him and talked to him and kind of, talked about the past and what happened and made peace with him. And my later years with my dad were good. I'll talk a bit more about that in the next session, but but what I was thinking, like I began the session, I'd left home at 18 and I was on the streets but now here I am, and have a family. I have 4 children, beautiful kids, a wife who's amazing. We don't always, get on all that, we fight from time to time.
It's just 2 humans,
but we love each other, and said we're now about to move out of our home in Lilydale to a new area. I've got a different career from where I started. Things have changed. It doesn't mean you're never going to have problems or worries, or anyone tells you that finding God means you're going to life's all going to be hunky-dory and no problems is not telling the truth. I don't think life gets any easier, but I kind of look back on how things have changed for me, and I think I have been really blessed and fortunate. And now my life's totally different. I'm not wandering the streets of St Kilda with 20 cents in my hand, wondering if I'll have enough to buy lunch, or dinner or whatever. I've got a family and a home and a career that's fulfilling. So yeah,
I suppose you could almost say finding God and religion sort of gave you uh, uh, the tools to sort of get through life and to deal with those
yeah,
hard times. You know,
yeah. Look, and
not
also,
necessarily solve all your problems, just help you get through them.
yeah, that's right. And I think too, like I said, I'm not into religion as such.
Mm,
I kind of think it's much more like I really see God as a friend,
mm,
and just not that's quite biblical. Jesus said, "I don't call you servants, I call you friends."
yeah,
It's in John 15, and I kind of see that really my closest and best friend, besides Nola, is God, and I spend a lot of time talking to him and handing over things that I struggle with to him
yeah,
over the years. And I think because of my past, I've struggled with depression quite a lot,
mm,
and really talking to God has been it doesn't solve it, but it gets me through it. Like you said, Mike, you're
yeah,
right. It helps you to kind of keep going when you just want to throw the towel in. So,
yeah,
looking back over those years that I've shared with 80s, 90s, life certainly changed a lot for me, and things kind of turned around little by little,
yeah,
not without struggle, but look at the beautiful kids I have now, all grown up, all adults and grandchildren now, and I know life's been good to me.
yeah. All right, well, why don't we leave it there for this session? Thanks.